7 o'clock, so we don't have as many as we did last time, but we're going to go ahead and get started. How are y'all? Good to see some of you again. We just hung up on another meeting, and we're back together again, so glad to see y'all. I'm going to go ahead and get started because I want to try to get you at least a little bit of time back. So tonight we're going to be talking about, and let me preface what I'm going to say first. So tonight's presentation is actually one that was done by Robert Marzano. I had the pleasure and honor of attending a conference where Dr. Marzano was presenting, and he did give all of us that attended permission to use his presentation. So, you know, he's obviously one of the masters and gurus in education, so I didn't feel like I could do any better than he did. So I just shamelessly used his presentation tonight. But what I want you guys to start thinking about is, you know, when we're talking about curriculum and instruction and assessment, and how we need to lead that so that it works well, one of the most critical elements is the idea around curriculum. You know, I just finished talking to the 8720 curriculum class, you know, about different curriculum models and all those kind of things. But I will tell you, you might be surprised in this day and age how many schools or districts or parishes do not have curriculum, or if they have it, they don't use it. And if they do have it and they do use it, it's not necessarily a good curriculum. The other part of it is too that curriculum can be inconsistent from school to school, particularly in implementation. It can be inconsistent from teacher to teacher and how well it's taught. So as you're thinking about the future and becoming the principal or the assistant superintendent or the superintendent, one of the things that I want you to really, you know, file away in that pack of all the things you want to remember to do when you're in that leadership role, if you're not there already, is to understand and go back and revisit the work of Robert Marzano and around the idea of a guaranteed and viable curriculum. So the single most, according to Marzano, the single most important initiative a school or district can engage in to raise student achievement is to guarantee every child has equal access to the same curriculum and that that curriculum is viable. Now, what he means when he talks about a curriculum being viable is the idea that the student not only has access to an excellent curriculum, but that curriculum is taught effectively and efficiently. So we all know, guys, you know, and this is kind of like, you know, what's said in EDL 710 stays in EDL 710. But I know we've all had those experiences where maybe our best friend is also a teaching colleague within our school. And while they may be your best friend, that doesn't mean you're the most effective teacher. And, you know, within any given grade level or subject area or whatever, the parents can tell you, many times the kids can tell you who the best and most effective teachers are. Because the best, most effective teachers understand that there has to be that equal opportunity for every child in the classroom. So they find a way to reach the gifted student as well as the special needs student. It's not it goes beyond the idea of teaching only to a certain set or certain level of students. So according to Marzano, the guaranteed and viable curriculum ensures that all students have an equal opportunity to learn. Now, let's think about that. What does that really mean, an equal opportunity to learn? Some of you may be thinking and, you know, pushing back in your mind and thinking, oh, you know, Johnny doesn't really deserve that because Johnny's like the worst kid in the school. He's always in trouble. You know, or I don't know how to teach a particular child. But guys, it comes down to every child deserves the same level of learning. And so if you have a child who's constantly out of the classroom for disruptive behavior or for discipline issues, they don't have an equal opportunity to learn. Or if a child is chronically absent or chronically tardy, or they have ADHD and they don't focus all the time, there's a lot of things that affect that opportunity to learn. The other thing is that every student has to have access to a highly effective teacher. The access to the same content, knowledge, and skills in each section or class. So I'm going to give you some concrete examples. So when I worked in Dallas most recently, we had a somewhat controversial superintendent. I loved the man because he was sort of like a Donald Trump as a superintendent. He didn't care what he said. He said what he thought, and he didn't care who he offended. He was really 1,000% there for kids. And he said that if we didn't have an effective teacher in front of every student, then we were deemed a failure. And he was right. So it became, some people would say it was a witch hunt. But in reality, we really started looking at the effectiveness of teachers, not just from a subjective standpoint, but also from a more objective standpoint. So it wasn't just about test scores and stuff like that. Yes, that matters. Test scores matter, guys, whether we like it or not. That is the reality in education. We looked at how well the teacher delivered instruction. We looked at the perceptions of the students. We looked at how well the teacher communicated. Lots of things went into that. And we began to realize just how many ineffective teachers we have. And I will tell you, in a large urban school district, it was pretty scary. It was almost 50% of our teachers were ineffective. So we started researching. What effect does an ineffective teacher have on a student's progress over time? So we had an extremely brilliant research and evaluation person in our school district. In fact, his research has been used literally across the nation. He was able to develop a predictor system. And it was pretty complicated. I actually understand it, but I don't know that I could explain it without like a whiteboard kind of deal, but I'll do my best. So he would look at a student's achievement historically, as well as other factors that we know impact student achievement, such as poverty, risk factors like they've failed two or more times, their special needs, they've had a death in their family, you know, all those things that affect kids. You know, we know there's a ton of them. In fact, in Texas, there's 13 at-risk indicators. So it was basically that list of 13 and then a few. And based on all of those factors, he could predict how well a student should perform on our state assessment. So let's say that the student should perform here, okay, at level, I don't know, make up a letter, level A. Well, the student, they actually perform above that level. So he would measure, using all kinds of mathematical algorithms, how far above that predicted score the student would score. Conversely, he would look and see how far below. What made this interesting and nice was he took into account all of those factors for our most at-risk students, but he also did the same process for our most gifted students. So maybe you have a student who's gifted and talented, they live in a very affluent home, they have had every educational advantage in the world, and they should be scoring up here. So let's say we're hoping to get everybody to this level, and you've got some kids that are here, you've got some that are below, you've got some that are above. He took the child wherever they were at and measured how close they came to the standard, okay? So we all know there's an absolute standard of passing, right? The gifted kid that's up here, he would see if they grew or if they dropped. And what we began to notice was some of our most challenging schools that were deemed low performing by the state actually were outperforming some of our schools that got all the accolades. Because what was happening was these schools were that were impoverished and lots of challenges, you know, in the worst part of the city, you know, kids literally didn't have clothes. I mean, really dire circumstances. These schools were moving these kids. They didn't quite reach the passing level according to the state, but they would go from the very bottom, you know, and move 30, 40 points. Conversely, some of our schools were very high achieving because they had all the gifted, talented kids. They were in an affluent area. They were dumbing their kids down to average. So when Marzano talks about having access to effective teachers, the research that Dr. Webster did showed the effect teachers have. And one of the most scary things that came out was that no matter where you fell on the scale, if you were at the bottom or if you were at the top, if you had an ineffective teacher for one school year, it took you 2 school years to recover, assuming you had an effective teacher the next 2 years. If you had an effective teacher 2 years in a row, it took you 5 years to recover. If you had an ineffective teacher for 3 years in a row as a student, we never recovered you. Horrifying, guys. 1 year and it takes 2, and that's assuming we can put you in a classroom with a highly effective teachers in the next 2 years. But if we mess you up, basically, 3 years in a row, those kids became our dropouts. They became our 21 and 22-year-old freshmen who could never get out of high school. They became our gang kids. They became our drug abusers. They became all of the awful things that happen to kids. So, if, you're probably, I'm preaching a little bit, so I'll back off here in a sec. I feel passionately about this. But when you're in that leadership role, I know the first time I had to terminate somebody was really hard for me to do because I loved my teachers. But I kept going back to that statistic because we only give kids one shot at an education. One, that's it. You don't get to, go back when you're 40 and redo 10th grade. You don't. One shot. Teachers all have degrees. They have the ability to go get another job somewhere else. So my responsibility was not to those teachers. It was to those kids. And if you were ineffective, I was failing as a leader if I let you stay in a classroom and hurt kids. That's what Marzano is trying to get to when he talks about a guaranteed and viable curriculum and an opportunity to learn. Guys, the most important people in the building are the teachers. I had a beloved superintendent. I would have walked through fire for this man. I thought so highly of him. He was an amazing person. And he used to say, it's not your job as a principal to take care of the students. It's your job to take care of the teachers because they will make or break students' lives. And they determine if a child is in poverty, they will determine whether or not that child remains in poverty and the next generation and the next generation after them does. If we can turn it around for that child by having the best teachers in the world and you give them everything they need and want, then you will, oh wow, I like somebody's music. And, hey Stacey, there you go. Then if we can turn it around for one child, you will end generational poverty. So guys, like I said, this is a little bit of preaching tonight, but I cannot tell you how important these 3 pieces are. I saw it revolutionize a school, and I saw it revolutionize kids' lives. So I hope you're the passionate leader who is a devotee of Marzano like I am. So I'm not going to walk you through all this. You have the PowerPoint. You can read it. But there are some key elements of that guaranteed and viable curriculum that you have to make sure happens. So when we're talking about the alignment between curriculum, instruction, and our assessment, our lovely little triad, when you're looking at specifically curriculum, you have to develop curriculum vertically, but also horizontally. And what I mean by that is, we are all really good about, when you write curriculum, and I've led curriculum writing many times. Okay, so here's what they learned in kindergarten. So what do we build on from kindergarten to write the first grade curriculum and on up the ladder? Everybody knows how to do that. That's pretty easy. What we don't often do is build horizontally. And what I mean by that is, I have to figure out a way to ensure that everybody, now I was in Irving ISD, we had 35,000 students. I was responsible for 30 some odd schools. It was hard for us to figure out how we could make sure that our horizontal curriculum was working. And what I mean by that is that every 4th grade teacher was teaching the curriculum to depth and complexity and with fidelity. And that every student in every classroom had that opportunity to learn. That's not easy, guys, but it's essential. How do you do that? You go beyond just writing curriculum. So you have to be in classrooms to make sure and observe that teachers are teaching the curriculum. You have to be willing to evaluate teachers in such a way that you know who's effective and who's not. And I used to, those of you that have had me before, and I'm a pretty straightforward person. And I used to literally stand up in front of my faculties and tell them, fair is not equal and equal is not fair. And if you're a rock star teacher in my building, I will walk to the ends of this earth to do anything to keep you here and make you happy because you're that important. But if you're a lousy teacher, I'm going to make your life miserable. And just know it. And if you don't like that, then don't stay in my school. Because I don't have time for you, and our kids sure as heck don't. And I will tell you, your rock star teachers will love you, and they will make sure that they get rid of those awful teachers for you. Great example. This teacher is like the bane of my existence to this day. The worst math teacher I've ever known in my life, a disgusting human being. And I don't say that very often about anybody. But she literally smelled. I'm not exaggerating. She literally smelled. She was nasty, dirty. The kids couldn't stand her. None of us liked her. We all had codes that if she started talking to any one person in the building, we would send a little distress signal over the radio, so we'd be called away because we couldn't even stand to talk to her. And I knew I had to get rid of her. But I was having a hard time because she was a master at any time I'd go in to observe, she put on a great show. And it was so bad that the students would literally turn around and say, oh, my name is Fraley at the time, Miss Fraley. She doesn't teach like this unless you're in the room. Oh, Miss Fraley, she never does this. The kids are brutally honest. But we were having a hard time getting the amount of documentation we needed to sustain a termination hearing. So my department chair for math came to me one day, and she said, Tracy, she said, do you trust me? And she's a rock star. I'm not kidding you. Oh, gosh. Shame she retired. Best teacher ever. And I said, yes, of course I trust you. She said, I just want to make sure that you trust me because I'm going to do something that may come back to bite me and you. And I said, Sue, whatever you got to do, I got your back. Because I really did. I really, truly trusted her. So they had their department meeting. And this particular teacher taught Algebra 1. And if you're a high school person, Algebra 1 is the gateway course to every other mathematics course that students will take the rest of their lives. If you don't master Algebra 1, then you can't do geometry or calculus or trig or pretty much anything else in life beyond that. So this teacher taught Algebra 1. And I've heard the rumblings from the other teachers who got the kids later on in Algebra 2 or geometry, or they weren't prepared. They're having to go back and reteach Algebra 1. And the teachers were fed up. So they had designed a department meeting that was basically an intervention. And they went around the room one by one, and they told her the truth. When I get your kids, they're this, that they lack this, this, and this. Another one, same thing. I don't like the fact that you don't contribute to our team. I mean, they all had, and they were all legitimate, and they backed it up with data and evidence. It wasn't a personal attack. It was about her performance. And at the end, they all said, you don't fit on our team. And so we're going to ask you to go find another job because you're not a part of our team, and we don't believe you have the capacity or the ability to do so. And we're sorry if it hurts your feelings. It's not that you're a bad person. You're not. But you don't fit into our team. She resigned the next day. I didn't have to go through termination. I didn't have to worry about any of that because the team took care of it. Effective teachers do not want to work with a weak link. So set up that culture and the conditions that make that happen. The other part of this is too that there has to be correlation, and you guys know this, we've talked about this before, with your assessment. Okay? Assessment doesn't happen just at the end of the year with the state test, because guess what? If they do badly, it's too late. Because you don't get them back the next year to redo it. They don't give the state assessment in the middle of the year to see if you can fix all the problems and retake it at the end of the year. It's too late, guys. Formative assessment, formative assessment, formative assessment. Formative assessment needs to happen daily. Very few teachers do formative assessment daily. Doesn't have to be a big deal, guys. It can be an exit ticket. It can be a three question, little quiz. It can be a journal entry. It can be a turn and talk to your neighbor. There's a million ways to do it. But formative assessment, even when done daily, which is ideal, is nothing if you don't act on the data. For an example, I had a teacher who did exit cards every day, exit tickets. Great questions, really in depth. She was doing a great job. But she didn't do anything with the data. She wasn't sitting down and laying out all the cards and seeing where the kids were. So I talked to her about that, and I'm like, okay, so, these three, and we grouped them. Okay, these 10, they got it. these 5 are a little unsure about the concept. These 3 absolutely do not have it. And I'm like, what do you do? And she's like, I don't know. She just taught her lesson the next day the same way. I'm like, you have to change what you're doing. So for those that have already got it, you move them on into enrichment. For those that are a little shaky on the concept, you do some reinforcement. But for these 3 over here, you better be seeing them in tutoring after school because they need in-depth time with you. You can't reteach that concept the way these kids need it during your class time. So instead of tutoring, being kids who want help coming in voluntarily, which are always your best and brightest anyway, or need homework help, we had a very structured, targeted tutoring program. So when those teachers did their formative assessment, they would give them to, the clerks and I had people that did this, and we would call the parent and just say, hey, Johnny needs to stay tomorrow for tutoring. And parents like, great, awesome, works. But we have to use the data from our formative as well as our summative assessments. We also have to make sure, too, that the curriculum is not housed solely in the hands and eyes of the teacher. The curriculum, when it works best, belongs to the students and to the parents. If your parents do not know what is in the curriculum, then we are doing a huge disservice to them. Our students need to know what's in the curriculum. When I would observe teachers, and I did this when I was an assistant superintendent as well as when I was a principal, I would go in and I never ever cared what the teacher was doing. Because I literally, for a long time until they kind of get used to me, they'd be like, oh, I'm not teaching right now. Because they weren't standing in front of the kids delivering concepts and content. The kids may have been in groups. And so they were facilitating, they were monitoring, they were doing all that. And I'm like, finally they learned, I'd rather see them doing that than if you're standing in front of the kids the whole time, we got a problem. But the whole idea is, I would go in and I would say to kids, what are you learning today? Why is it important that you learn this? How are you going to use this learning? And how do you know if you've learned it? And if the kids could answer those 4 questions, that teacher got the best evaluation in the world from me for that day. If the kids couldn't answer those 4 questions, then we had a problem. And it may mean that I needed to coach the teacher and guide them some more. There were times that I would kind of, not literally, but I'd kind of nudge the teacher aside and I'd take over because the teacher maybe didn't know how to do something and I could model in the moment because, I should be, the principal should be the master teacher, right? So I would model for them and we would do sort of this nice little dance where I would model it and then the teacher would come in and try it and then, I'd do thumbs up or, we just kind of keep doing this till we got it right. But if those 4 questions can be answered, you have an effective classroom and an effective teacher. But if kids don't know what they're learning or why they're learning it, how are they ever going to remember it? So really critical when you think about a viability of curriculum. The other thing too, when we talk about that opportunity to learn, that is, as I said, the strongest relationship between achievement and teaching. So if you're in a school that's struggling with student achievement, the first thing that I would look at is opportunity to learn. How much time in class is actually spent on learning? One of the things that is an easy way to monitor this or to sort of get some good and fast data, my administrative team and I, we would go in classrooms and we would literally just every minute write down what was going on in the classroom. So minute 1, kids are filing in. Minute 2, kids are still filing in. Minute 3, kids are still filing in. On down the line. And all we were doing, it was very objective because literally all we were doing was writing down what the kids were doing. And then we put all that together and we were astounded in my school that I got that was low achieving. 45% of the class time was not devoted to learning. 45%. No wonder the teachers couldn't get through the curriculum because it took them 5 to 10 to 15 minutes to get the kids all in and settled, to take roll, to do that administrative stuff. I got to the point I'm like, I don't care if you even take roll. For God's sakes, just start teaching. Have the kids sign in. Pass a piece of paper around, right? Have them write down something. So we became masterful at creating ways to reduce administrative time that was happening in a classroom to focus on instruction. And guess what? Teaching didn't change, nothing changed, other than we spent every minute we could possibly carve out teaching, and we went from low achieving to almost recognized in a single year. Pretty simple change, guys. But most people don't really think about how we use time effectively. The other thing that we did was our announcements were supposed to be 5 minutes, but they usually lasted 20. At 5 minutes, I shut off the PA system. I don't care if all the announcements were done or not, because I couldn't afford for my kids to not have that opportunity to learn. So it's very, very important that we make sure that that time is there. It also requires that we are using what Marzano calls power standards. Bill Daggett is another researcher that I really like. He's actually a futurist, so if you have never looked at anything Bill Daggett's done, just Google his name. He's really an interesting guy. One of the best conferences I've ever been to in my life is his conferences. But he's the one who talks about rigor, relevance, and relationships, the 3 R's in terms of teaching and learning and student success. He has gone through and done massive audits of every state's curriculum, and he will tell you that at least 30% to 50% of the curriculum doesn't need to be taught because it's not tested, it's not high stakes, or it's not even necessary. So one of the things that I know that we did, and he says Texas had one of the worst, that 50% of the curriculum did not need to be taught. So we went through when the state released our state assessments, and we did a major alignment, and we threw out about half of the standards that the state told us we needed to teach. Now, some of them we didn't literally throw out. We bundled them with others. We spiraled them with others. There's ways to compact them. A standard could be taught within a standard kind of thing. And absolutely condensed our curriculum so that teachers could teach not only the breadth of it, but the depth of it. Yeah. Yeah, Jennifer, I love, sorry, I'm looking at the chat. I love Daggett and the Quad D focused curriculum. Yeah, it really, really works. Like I said, if you don't know who Bill Daggett is, Google him, read his stuff, and go to his conference. He's amazing. Jennifer, do you want to say something since you guys use him? You want to chime in, or you just want to leave your chat?
Yeah, I'm sorry, my daughter's here.
No, it's okay.
We are probably within the last 3 years we're got STEM accredited, and that Daggett model really helped us to focus more on that Quad D. And I'm a kindergarten teacher, and people thought I was like, you can't be STEM certified as a K-12 school. And he really just focuses on application, but using the content with that application in your daily lesson. So, I mean, I could teach about forms of matter in my kindergarten classroom with our research project with kindergartners using that model. I mean, on any subject, he's amazing. He's amazing.
Yeah, and I see Rebecca too just chimed in about Ron Clark. He does a lot of the same stuff. And, guys, don't be afraid, even if your school's not moving that way, but within your realm of scope of influence, I guess, whether it's your team or your own classroom, to look at some of this stuff and really pinpoint and focus, because it will make all the difference in the world. The other thing too is that you have to realistically teach your students to mastery. So we've talked before about how you unpack a standard, and another person that I love is Margaret Kilgo. She sort of wrote the book on how you unpack a standard, and it's all about teaching your kids to mastery. So don't be afraid to teach at a high level of rigor, even if you feel like the students don't have foundational skills that are going to get you there. That's part of that opportunity to learn. Let's see what else I want to talk to you guys about. The other part of it too, so again, let's go back to the idea of leading instruction and assessment. So not only do you have to have that guaranteed and viable curriculum, there has to be the opportunity to learn. But when you're talking about instruction, guys, you have to become the experts in what good quality instruction looks like. So just raise your hands for those of you that are on video with me. How many of you feel work at the elementary level? Okay. How many at the middle school level? Okay, do we have any high school people? Just a couple. Okay. My expertise in life as a teacher was special needs students. I was a special education teacher, and then I also taught high school English. I happen to have a decent background just from, my academic record in math and science, but I am by no means an expert. I can go in and effectively observe a Chinese teacher and tell you if she's an effective teacher or not, and I don't speak one word of Chinese. I can do the same thing in a physics class, a calculus class, a kindergarten class, a pre-kindergarten class, you name it, I can do it. You know why? I may not know the content. They may make content errors that I would miss. I'll give you that. But I know what effective instruction looks like. How do I know what effective instruction looks like? Because when I observe teachers, I observe kids, not the teacher. I can tell if kids are able to do the work. I can see if they're collaborating. I can tell if they're thinking. I listen to the kinds of questions they ask, and if they don't ask any questions, that tells me right there I don't have an effective classroom. There's a lot of ways that we have to look at instruction to know whether or not the viability of the curriculum is happening with an effective teacher. So one of the things that I found lacking in my master's degree program, and quite frankly, I'm not sure I ever really mastered until probably the last, I wouldn't say master, I'm still growing, but probably the last 8 to 10 years of my career in education, is learning how to coach teachers and give feedback to teachers, which is vastly different than evaluating teachers. Okay? So let's kind of go back from the idea of, and those of you that have had EDL 700 with me know you're going to know what I'm talking about. We tiered our teachers. I'm going to actually give you tools when you take EDL 700 with me on how to do that. But one of the first things that we did every year as an administrative team was we divided our teachers into 4 quadrants. Effective, not effective. Let me go back. It's actually willing and able, unwilling but able, unwilling, no, I'm going to get them wrong. I have to actually look at them. 4 quadrants. So let me start over. Willing and able, unwilling, able, unable but willing, unable, unwilling. What do I mean by that? Able talks about ability. So have you ever experienced someone who can do a dog and pony show sort of lesson and it looks stellar? That tells me they're able. Back in my day, we were observed twice a year. That's the only time anybody ever came in your classroom. And it was for 45 minutes, and that was your evaluation rating for the year. Okay, now that was 1,000 years ago. We've learned a lot. But some teachers could be dismal every day, but they knew how to put on a dog and pony show that made them look like a rock star. They were able. The unwilling or willing part deals with how willing they are to learn, to grow, and to work with you. And I promise you, in every school, we actually go through this in EDL 700, but in every school, there are all 4 types of teachers. So we would literally place our teachers in those quadrants. Then we would look at their achievement levels and we would rank them. 99% of the time, and I've done this a million times with different faculties, I've taught principals how to do it, I've done it with them, with their faculties, 99% of the time, your teachers who are willing and able, the rock star, good attitude, they're always trying to learn something, they're just go above and beyond, people like y'all, they have the ability to teach. They were also my top performers. They were always in the top quartile of student achievement. Then when you move over to your unwilling but able, those are the teachers that were usually somewhere in the top 2 quadrants. They just had a bad attitude. They just got on everybody's nerves. They were always the thorn in my side as principal. If I said, today we're only going to drink water in the cafeteria, they would give me a million reasons why that was a bad idea. But they got results. And if you go over to my other quadrant, sorry, I'm a very visual person, so I'm literally seeing this in my head. For those that were unable, so I did unwilling, able, okay. So that were unable but willing. Oftentimes they were my new teachers or people that had a great attitude, they wanted to learn, they just didn't have the skill set yet. Or, maybe they just hadn't had a good foundational program. Then you have your unwilling and your unable. My willing and able people, remember I told you I was really honest with my faculty. I didn't tell them which quadrant I wasn't that crazy. I didn't tell them which quadrant they were in, but those were my rock star teachers that I did everything in my power to keep them happy. Because you know what? I needed those people. So, go to their way. What do you need? What do you need, Mr. Tillerson? Can I do this for you? Can I do that for you? What do you need? Anything. My unwilling but able, I had to figure out a way. I became the best used car salesman in Texas because, and I used to, honestly, this may sound crazy, but I would coach my principals to go watch a used car salesman. Go pretend you're going to buy a used car even though you're not, and watch them and learn from it. And they're like, what in the hell are you talking about, lady? You lost your mind. But think about a used car salesman. What's the first thing they do? They size you up. So what do they do with a mom who's got 2 little kids in tow? They steer you towards the minivan, or they steer you towards the SUV. Or a guy who's, I'm stereotyping, but that's what used car salesmen do. Or the guy who's 60 and newly single, send him towards a sports car. They size you up. Then they figure out what it is because they listen. They really, really listen to you. And they start figuring out all the things you want and need. So the next thing you know, you're thinking about, well, you have to be careful when you do this because I actually had a principal who bought a car she didn't mean to because she was like, wow, he really did get to me. He convinced her that she traded in her car on this new one. But they figure out what makes you tick. That's what you have to do with those teachers that are unwilling and able. You got to figure out what makes them tick because you don't want to lose them because they're getting results. But you got to win them over if you can. Now, I couldn't win over everybody, but at least somebody on my team could win them over. And I was fine with, Bob. Bob is a literal person, but he became little. We always referred to Bob as our teacher, our stereotypical teacher. Bob didn't like me. I didn't particularly care for Bob, but Bob got great results. But Bob just loved my assistant principal. Bob, I made her his evaluator. Anything Bob needed, he went to her. It worked. When you come down to those that are unable but willing, your people that have a great attitude, man, you send them to professional development. You give them a coach. You have them observe other teachers. You go in their classroom and model for them. They just need to grow their skills. But guys, they can do it. Those down here that are unwilling and unable, they have a bad attitude, they're a thorn in your side, and they're not getting results, that became the hit list. Not literally. But those are the people that we were going to make sure we documented out. Because they weren't good for kids, they were killing our staff, they were hurting the culture of our school, and you guys know this, in your classroom, you may feel like you've got 10 kids that are awful, but in reality it's just 2. Those were those teachers. My first year as a high school principal at one particular school, I had 200 teachers. 34 of them either got terminated or left voluntarily. Now, when you come in as a new principal, that kind of turnover is usually not good. And I just thought, oh my gosh, my superintendent is going to kill me. He called me and congratulated me. From that moment forward, my school went from not doing very well to a National Blue Ribbon School of Excellence. And we were named by the Intel Foundation as the best school in the United States within 2 years of doing that. So year 1 was kind of like, got a clean house. Year 3, National Blue Ribbon of School of Excellence, and we were truly diverse. Like I said, I wasn't an affluent school. They weren't, and it was because, guys, what we forget oftentimes when we're talking about instruction and curriculum and assessment and all those pieces, you have to have a good culture in place, and there's nothing more disheartening to an effective teacher than knowing that the person next door may be making more money than you're making, and they're doing a terrible job, and they're hurting kids. Guys, that brings everybody down. But make a huge difference. And I see Kale talking about buy-in. Yeah, you have to have buy-in. But you know how you get buy-in? You use your team. You use your willing and your able. You even pull in those that are willing but unable because they're going to be with you. That's 50% or more of your staff right there. And when they feel like rock stars and they feel loved and appreciated and supported, guess what? They helped me. I didn't get 34 teachers to leave on their own. I didn't do 34 terminations. That's impossible. You'll be lucky if you can do 1 or 2 terminations a year. It's that hard to terminate somebody, as it should be. It's not something you take lightly. It should be hard. But you know what? That 50+% of my team started saying to the others, gosh, you know, you could retire. You're actually losing. I mean, they started, it just happened. And we were very excited by the end of the 3rd year. We didn't have anybody in that bottom quadrant anymore. The other thing we started doing is when we interviewed, we had a team approach. People thought I was insane. When I would go to like a job fair, there were 10 of us on our team, including the student. And you knew who got final say on whether somebody got hired or not was the student. Because I wanted to, you know, everybody thought I was insane. Why in the world would you let a student decide? Even some of my team members, until they listened to the questions of my students and they heard why students said yes or no to a teacher. And like I said, we got to the point we literally had nobody. We eventually only had 2 quadrants. It was the most amazing thing because we made sure that we took care of what mattered. And that was instruction in the classroom and effective teachers. And that's kind of Marzano's whole point when he talks about viability. Because effective teachers, I didn't have to worry about if the curriculum was being used. They used it. They pointed out all the errors and mistakes in it. They became the writers for the district. They became the writers and readers for advanced placement. They were on the state committees. I mean, in fact, at one time, and I don't know if it's like this in Louisiana, but in Texas, when they write curriculum, they bring in master teachers from across the state. Texas is a big state, over 1,100 school districts. Dallas ISD alone employs over 10,000 teachers. So it's pretty hard to get on those committees at the state level. At one time, I had 10 people on the state committees from one school because it became just such a part of what we did. Effective teaching matters. And guys, when you lead instruction and you lead assessment, that is your job. You got to have the right curriculum. It has to be aligned to the assessment. Assessment has to be frequent, often, and data has to be used. But at the end of the day, if you screw up the curriculum and you screw up the assessment, if you have an effective teacher for every kid in every classroom who teaches every minute that is available to them, your student success will soar. And I don't care if you're in the richest of rich schools or you're in the poorest of the poor, because I've seen it happen in every kind of environment. So I'm off my soapbox for the night. What questions do you guys have? Obviously, this is a topic I feel very passionately about. Questions, comments about anything, guys? Not just about our talk tonight, but assignments or anything like that? Okay, y'all made it way too easy.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am. Go right ahead.
Regarding turning in the group assignment, we did it all on Google Drive. Can I just share it to you on Google Drive?
Okay, yeah, you can. Yeah, just send me a shareable link if you want to, or the email, or there's several ways to do that. But yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Awesome.
Okay. The upcoming assignment, Tran. Tran, which one? I'm sorry. We have several. He's typing. Sorry. Okay. Tell me the assignment though that you're referring to. Is it the individual, the case study? Okay, the individual one. Basically, guys, I'm not a very politically correct person most of the time, so stop overthinking what you're doing. My favorite question when I was a coach, the individual, not the case study. Okay, the individual in the next one. When I coached principals, which is what I did 90% of my time, and then I evaluated them the other 10%. What's the worst thing that can happen? And if nobody's going to die, or there's not going to be like a revolution, then go for it, take a risk. Guys, I'm really more interested in seeing your thinking than getting a right answer. Okay, so when you're doing the individual assignment, follow the instructions and the templates and answer the questions, or fill in the blanks or whatever it is, that particular part of it. But I just want to see what your thought processes are. and how you make sense of all of these elements. Because there's a million different ways. With the case studies, you need to provide references only if you are quoting somebody specifically or excerpting, because, you know, we just want to do the right stuff. But, you know, in terms of, like I said, there's no set, I mean, that Dr. Perry and I had this discussion the other day. If there were a guidebook or a rule book or a checklist on how to be an effective leader, trust me, he and I would publish it tomorrow, and we would be bazillionaires, and we wouldn't be teaching you guys any. Well, we probably still would, because you know I both love teaching. But there's not. It's kind of like being a great teacher. It's part art and it's part science. It's the same thing with being an effective leader. So I'm not interested in you getting the right answer, because for every answer you give me, I can argue against it or I can argue for it. It's really about sharing your thinking and justify, and not even, I hate the word justify because it's so strong, but in essence, giving me background that helps me to understand why you believe this. Why do I want you to develop this skill? Because when you are a leader, assistant principal, principal, dean, assistant superintendent, coach, whatever you go to do next, there will be a time, more often than not, you have to sell somebody on your idea. And your idea or your stance or your belief may be completely different. This may sound like a stupid example, but I think it for me exemplifies what I mean. High school principal in Texas. Football kind of matters in Texas, and I happened to go to a very competitive high school as a student, and I wanted a winning football team. Why did I want a winning football team? Because if you can win at football, it makes everything else a lot easier, because it's something the community can grasp onto and be proud of. And suddenly they're supporting your school when you need them to, I don't know, make their kids do their homework. So I fired the head football coach, and I'm ready to hire a new one. I was a very young high school principal, particularly to be in a large, at that time Texas only went to 5A, now they have 6A. To be a 5A female high school principal was kind of a big deal in that day, particularly one that was well under 40. So you know, the athletic director for my school district is renowned in Texas football circles. He was sending me all these people, and it just didn't feel right. You know, part of hiring is just your gut instinct. I wanted a guy that was going to be as raw about this school as I was, and was going to help. It was a symbiotic relationship in my mind. Okay? So one of my coaches came to me and said, "Tracy, I know this great guy. I want you to interview him." And for the football coach, and he's at North Dallas High School. What he didn't know at the time was I had been the principal at Spence Middle School in Dallas, which fed to North Dallas High School. Those were my kiddos. I knew the school well. And he said, he's got a winning record. First winning record ever at that school in 50 years. Well, I knew the kids. I'm like, wow, because we were not known for football, trust me. I thought, anybody can get a winning record at North Dallas High School, I just at least want to talk to her. I got to meet this guy. It's like we fell in love with each other, because the normal 30-minute interview turned into 5 hours. We saw eye to eye on everything. Now, only one problem. He'd only been a head football coach at Little North Dallas High School, Dallas, Texas, not a known football powerhouse, and he was very young. He was only 32. In Texas, that's apparently young for a high school football coach. So the athletic director and I were supposed to get together and choose a coach. We couldn't agree, because he wanted me to bring in this guy from somewhere else. Just believe it. Okay? I didn't like him. I didn't think he was the right fit. Nice guy, but I just didn't think he was the right fit. I wanted this young guy who was unproven. This other guy had won state championships and all that. My guy was very unproven. But I knew in my gut he was the right guy. So the superintendent learned that we couldn't come to an agreement. He called us both in. And my superintendent at the time, Mr. Singley, who is now passed, who adored man, he sat back in his desk, could be very intimidating looking. And he said, all right, athletic director, you give me your reasons. Tracy, you give me yours. So we both did, spelled it out. And I was very passionate. And he said, Tracy, he said, you know who this man is, right? And I'm like, yes. And I know his legend and you know, his reputation, and I respect him and all that. But here's why my guy's the right guy. And I just kept pushing, which is, you know, you don't generally do that with your superintendent, but I felt that strongly. I felt so strongly that I said to him, I'll tell you what, Mr. Singley, if you will let me hire this guy at the end of the year, if he doesn't have a winning season, now keep in mind, we were 9-1. I mean, I'm sorry, 1-9. We had a terrible record. If we don't have a winning season and this doesn't work out, you will not only get his resignation, you'll get mine too. That's how strongly I felt. Superintendent kind of sits back and smiles and says, I'm going to go with Tracy's choice. Here's why. Number one, in the state of Texas, the principal has the right to hire anyone on their campus. We can't tell her who to hire, so she's within her legal rights. But number two, she's done her research, and she has compelling reasons. The guy that you're wanting, I forgive me for telling this story, but he's like, you didn't do your research. Because did you know he was caught running out of one of his players' houses where he's having an affair with his mother, buck naked, and it was all over the town, and we don't need that here? And I'm like, I didn't know that. I'm like, oh, thank goodness. Whew. You know, I did the right thing. Because I stuck to I learned how important it was to stick to that passion. We went the next year 9-1. The next year we were 10-0. If you know anything about Texas football, we beat Allen High School. Little old MacArthur beat Allen High School, this perennial state champions. We also beat Trinity at home. First time in 17 years they'd been beaten at home. We beat them. Coach of the year. He's now a head coach in college because I knew there was something special about this guy. But what made him special to me, I supported that team and supported him to the nth degree. When it was time for my Super Bowl, as he called it, which was state assessment, you know what they did every football practice? The first hour they tutored kids because he hired teachers, not coaches. They were great coaches. They were also great teachers. He hired effective teachers because that's what I needed a coach to do. They tutored the first hour of football practice. They gave up an hour of practice to tutor because they knew academics mattered. We had more kids in the state of Texas get Division I full ride scholarships in football who also qualified academically, because that's the untold secret, guys. Tons of kids out there who get D1 scholarships in sports, but they can't qualify academically for the school. More in the state of Texas than any other school. Effectiveness matters. And when you're doing your assignment, the whole point of my story, sorry, a little rambling, I want you to sell me with passion on what you believe when you do your assignment. It's not a right or wrong answer. It's about selling me on your passion, because you're going to come to the hill that you have to decide if you're going to die on. And I could have rolled over and been like, fine, we'll go with who the athletic director wants. He was a, decent guy, probably made us win. But he didn't help the culture of my school. And when we got the National Blue Ribbon Award and we got the best of the best school, I took my head football coach with me. And people there were like, why in the hell would you bring a coach? You're supposed to be talking about why you're an effective school. Because he mattered. He was part of that team. And he made sure that his kids, his football players, he went to their classrooms every day and checked in. If those kids got in trouble with a teacher, they hoped they got sent to the office. Because the coach found out first. He made sure they sat in what he called the learning tea. He made sure they had everything they needed. It was amazing. He was a part of that team. And when we got up to present as a school about how we got this recognition and what we did, everybody was blown away because he mattered too, guys. So show me your passion. Show me your belief when you do the case study, the individual assignment, and the final. Because that's what I want to see. I want you guys to learn. You already know this, but I want to teach you to be great salespeople. Because as a leader, you're selling things all the time. You're convincing people to do things they don't want to do and enjoy it and think it was their idea. That's the essence of leadership, like it or not. So, Tran, did I answer your question at all? And if not, email me and I'll be glad to go through the assignment with you. Okay? Oh, thank you, Gail. I like that. Oh, yeah, one other thing too, Jennifer, thank you, about culture, guys. Culture is the most important thing in a school ever, followed by climate. And people don't talk about that very often. Most people don't even know the difference. So I'll give you a bonus and I'm gonna let you guys go tonight. Culture of a school is the way you do things and what you believe. The climate of the school is how you feel. I can tell you the climate of the school the minute I walk in the door. I don't even have to get all the way in the door and I can tell you the climate of a school. The culture is what you build over time, and it's the most essential thing that you do. And like I said, I had it's really funny. All of us from that time period, we still are really close friends. We get together all the time. We talk, and we're all over the country. But it was such a magical time. And the reason it was all the right people came together for all the right reasons. And it was like a mission. It was like an out-of-body experience. And interestingly enough, that time period is still talked about by the students at that school. And they weren't there, but it was so well known and so it proliferated the whole city, so much so that kids talk about, gosh, I wish I'd been at MacArthur during or those years or whatever. And practically all of those kids are my Facebook friends from that era. I mean, it's like ridiculous. And I'm telling you, it's pretty atypical that high school kids want to be Facebook friends with their principal after they graduate. But again, we just felt like a family. And, keep that passion going, feel that passionately, and bring people along that feel the same way, guys. It's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah, the Module 6 assignment is based on planning a lesson on a standard. Yes. Yeah, pick a standard, any standard, I don't care. And do that. Thank you, guys. Okay, I'm off my soapbox, sorry. And like I said, it really is my passion because I saw a school go from mediocre to absolute greatness. But it wasn't great because it was great for what it did for kids. I mean, I just am still so blown away by what these kids have accomplished. I mean, in fact, one more thing, I'll shut up. Two of my former students called me 3 years ago. They said, we want you to marry us. We're getting married. And I'm like, what? I'm not a minister. Like, no. I'm like, why me? And they said, because and so I performed their wedding ceremony. I got to be a minister for a night. So it was pretty cool. But like I said, that's just, if you're not in that kind of school, find a school like that. Life's too short not to be places like that or to create a place like that. So, okay, anything else? I'm just looking back through real quick. I'll come to Mansfield. I love Mansfield. If I weren't happily married in Louisiana, I would. Okay, all right, guys, you sure no other questions? If so, email me. I did a bunch of grading. I'm sort of caught up. I'll continue to hit it hard and all of that, but just go with your gut. Like I said, I'm not a hard, I'm not a hard-nosed kind of professor who it's my way or you get a bad grade, because there's no right way. Okay? Okay. All right, guys. Thank y'all. Have a great weekend, and we will see you next week. Thanks. Bye.
Professor.
Yes. I'm sorry. Hang on. Let me go ahead.
Can Group A stay after for a quick meeting?
Yeah, Group A, and I think Margie loves Group C. Anybody else need to stay? Group A's meeting immediately now, so stay on. So I won't end the meeting for all guys. I'll just cancel out for me, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Stop recording.